Welcome to Moksa's Workflow Manager training movie. This is the third movie in this exercise 1, creating a first workflow. In the first movie, we talked about the checkup of your installation. We went through all the parts and verified if everything was installed properly. In the second part, we created a new workflow using the workflow builder. And now in this third movie, we are finally going to start the workflow in the portal and execute a workflow task. And we'll also have a look at the workflow reporter. In Cumulus, in the previous movie, we created this first training movie. And when we have a look at it, it consists of a marketing user list or swim lane. It has an approval task in which users will have to approve a design or the document uploaded in the workflow portal, and the approved assets, the approved records will be mailed to that person in a collection basket, a pin basket from sites. When you go to the website, you go to your standard sites interface, and the user who is allowed to kick off workflows logs in with his normal login credentials. If this user is a proper workflow portal user, then this user will have this extra button here. This extra button only appears if this user or the role of this user has a permission called $workflow portal. We will see the workflow reporter in a few minutes, but you only see this button if you have the permission $workflow reporter or workflow admin or workflow reporter admin. When a user starts a workflow, he can first start with searching for the assets, the records that he wants to use in this workflow, or if there's no files or records in Cumulus that he wants to use, he can go directly to the workflow portal. When he clicks on this button, he gets the list of available workflows for him, the workflow templates that he is allowed to use. You are only allowed to use a template if it's enabled for workflow portal, as we saw in the previous exercise, and you can filter per role or per user which workflows they can see. In our example, we didn't filter anything. We are showing all, so we see this first training movie here at the bottom. I can select it, and now I enter the workflow configuration. In this configuration, in several steps, I will be able to configure my workflow. Some of these steps might be shown or hidden depending on your configuration in the workflow template. In this example, we did not disable anything, so we are seeing all 4 parts here. First of all, it proposes a workflow name. You can choose to use this name, or you can type in whatever other name you want, except that you're not allowed to use colons or slashes or other special characters. You can set a start date for a workflow. That means that normally by default a workflow will start immediately, but maybe you are scheduling workflows, you are organizing work, and that could be it could be necessary to schedule that in the future. So you could just as well say that this has to kick off on March 1st or tomorrow, or whichever date is necessary for this workflow. In this workflow, you can add your input records, and the input records are available either from the collection basket. If I enable this check mark, it will import the files that are in your collection basket, or you can decide to upload files. You can decide to upload files one by one or by multi-file upload. Multi-file upload will enable you to just drag and drop files in a drop area, while single file upload just asks you to select a file. You can select any file you like. The purpose is, of course, to select the document that you've prepared for this workflow. So in this case, I'll go to my desktop and I'll get the file that I prepared for this particular workflow. I click here to upload, and the file will be uploaded into the catalog. In the meantime, I can go to the next step. I don't have to wait for it, but as you can see, it goes pretty fast. The next step in the workflow is determining or setting the participants. It's very important that you define who is going to execute this task or the tasks in this workflow. As we saw in the designer, there was only one user list, one participant necessary for this workflow, so we only have to select one. There are parameters that you can set, that this is auto selected, that this is hidden, etc., etc. But in this example, you get a selection. So I'm clicking on the drop down and automatically the list of users appears. In this case, we are using the enterprise version of Workflow Manager, so I can select a role, or from a role the users. If you're using the workflow version, you will only be able to select a user. You can also set a task administrator. Every task can have an administrator that is notified by email if something happened with this task, started, stopped, delayed. So you can keep it as configured, or you can set it in the workflow task. Again, this is a part that could be hidden. The most important part of this workflow configuration are the instructions. In the template per task, you gave a generic description of what is expected from the user in that particular task. Here, at the start of the workflow, you are going to describe in the instructions the exact job you require from the user. And so the exact task that he or she will have to perform, or across the whole workflow that all participants will have to perform. You can describe it here, so I can say, please, this new design for marketing. You could also here have select an instruction file. Maybe you have a briefing file, maybe you have a style guide, all kinds of files that could help the user to perform his task, or that could give him extra information. All that kind of files you can upload here in the instructions. These are the additional documents that will be available for every user in every task throughout the whole workflow. Once you've finished this step, we can click on Save. At this point, the workflow configuration checks if you entered every information that was required, and if that is the case, then it gives you a summary. Otherwise, it gives you an error message. If you see that you made a mistake, you can always go back and fix the problem that might occur. At this point, I started the workflow, so I can close my workflow portal. I can decide to kick off a new job, or I can just log out. Behind the scenes, the workflow engine is running as a scheduler task in Cumulus Scheduler every minute. So within 1 or 2 minutes, the first user in this workflow should receive an email describing his task. You can, on top of the normal wait for mail, you can also decide to use the workflow reporter. You can type in the URL like this, or you could from inside Sites click on the button that you had to go to the workflow reporter. The workflow reporter gives you access to the workflows, and depending on your permissions you will have or see more or less workflows that are running. If I am Martin in this case, who is the first person who will receive a notification, who is the first person who has to perform a task, if Martin logs into his workflow reporter, he can have a look at his active workflows. He can have a look at his tasks pending. He can see departments, which is actually roles, what are the workflows for my role, and what are the completed workflows. As I said, these menu items can be different per permission you have in this workflow reporter. If you are an administrator, you can see extra menu items and maybe access more workflows. As I said, we will quickly check our mail. At this point, we should have received the email. So if we have a look at Martin and we get the email, we see that Martin is receiving an email here. And in the mail is the complete description of what you added in the template task. In this case, this was very basic, but all the parts of all the information that is in your workflow or in your task could be displayed here in the mail. So the additional instructions that I typed in could have been part of this mail. As I said a few minutes ago, this way the user is notified that he or she has to perform a task. The user could also just here in the workflow reporter have said open my task mail, and the user would receive exactly the same description, the same mail as he has received in his mailbox. So this is a kind of his to-do list or dashboard where he can access his workflows. He doesn't have to wait for the mail to come in or have to go to his mail client, whichever is preferred by the user. If I click here on the link in the mail, I will see that automatically it opens Sites with your task. You can see in the task that what kind of task it is, so you can see the instructions. All information is displayed here in this task. On the left you have the generic or the information you described in your template for that task, and below you have the additional instructions, which are the instructions that were typed in the portal. There is other information available from time to time, like workflow information, additional fields, but we will come to that in a later stage. A user can approve or reject, so he can download the file, have a look at it, preview it, get all the information that is or all the functionalities that Standard Sites offers them can be used to evaluate this file. If the user also purchased vProof Bridge and has vProof, there would be extra buttons here to proof this design in vProof, which is a high-end proofing tool for the web. In our example, we will keep it very simple. I'm going to approve this. I can optionally add a comment. I could say design is okay. And as soon as I confirm, the backend will check what I've just entered and will register this approval. There could be multiple files to approve, so I could go to the next and the next and the next file to approve. So I have an approve all or reject all. But in my case, I can just say submit. If you're not ready to approve, or you still have doubts, you can always say I close and I come back later to finish the job. But in this case, I'm submitting. Again, the backend is checking if everything is properly submitted, and then it automatically logs out. My job is finished. I performed the task that was required, and it will now go to the next task in the workflow. The next task in the workflow is actually a create collection task, so it will now create a collection of your approved design. Where can I find that? Well, if I have a look in my workflow, I can go to the current task, I can go to just the workflow. And if I have a look in the workflow, I can see that this person at the start has provided this file, and then this next task, it was approved, so the job was completed here. In a summary per file, you can see if the job is completed or if some participant in the workflow still needs to do his or her job. If we have a look in the workflow task individually, if we have a look, for instance, at the approval task, we can see in the approval task what files came in, what files came out, and what remarks were made per person on this particular file. So you have a complete traceability. You can always have a look at who was notified or who was asked to perform a task at what moment in time. So you can see the exact mail. As a manager, you can follow the steps of every workflow and at what stage or for whom this particular workflow is still running or waiting for a result. So the final email and the final task was the create collection task, and this task was directed to Martin. What did this task do? Well, it created a collection basket. So if we have a look, you will see that Martin should have received an email telling him that he received a pin basket with some files or records. So if I have a look in the mail again of Martin and I check his mail, I can now see that he received a new mail. If I look at that mail, this mail, it's the mail we just saw in the workflow reporter, and he can just click on the link and it opens automatically Cumulus sites as a pin basket with those records that were approved in this workflow. The user can do whatever was configured in this task, and in this case this is preview, information window, and download. So this pretty much concludes our first exercise from creating a workflow to completely executing a template. The template can be executed many times. It can be reused, so it's very easy to configure. And in the next exercise we will go on and build more workflows. Thank you for joining me. See you in the next movie.